I'm Michael, and today we're going to make these wall-hanging candle holders out of resin, sawdust, and copper pipe. Let's get started. Alright, so we have the pieces of bark that we cut now, and I have a shipping container. And I already went ahead and coated one of these completely with Tyvek tape. Inside the sides, all on the bottom, it has about as good a seal as it possibly can. And now I am just going to spray silicone mold release on the inside, nice good coating. And then I'm going to take my bark and I am going to try to piece it in here. Alright, and for this guy here, I'm going to use some Total Boat Epoxy. I have a feeling that this is going to be pretty messy, so I am going to wear some gloves for this next part. All I'm doing right now is I'm just stirring in sawdust. No idea if this is going to work or not, but we will find out tomorrow morning, I guess. So now I'm just going to take the slices that we've cut on the bandsaw and cleaned, and I'm just going to spray the silicone mold with silicone mold release, and then lay these out in there with some hot glue to hold them down so they don't float when we pour our next resin pour. Stirring up the resin. It's really boring to do. I then cut some 1/2-inch copper pipe using a vise and my jigsaw. You could also use a pipe cutter for this, but mine wasn't laying around, so I thought that this was a little bit easier. After cutting the pieces of pipe, I removed the burrs on the ends of the pipe from the cutting using the belt sander, and then added a uniform finish and texture using a silicone sanding pad on my flex shaft. After repeating that process on the other pieces of pipe and the connectors, after preparing the pipe, I marked the position that I wanted it to be on the back plates, and I drilled a hole using a Forstner bit partway through the resin. Alright, so now all we have left is the final assembly. The first thing that I'm going to do is I am just going to flip these over, and I'm going to use epoxy to put one of these flush mount hardwares on each of them, approximately centered at the top. And then we're going to let that dry for about 5 minutes, and then we can flip it over and we can assemble the rest of it. Let's do it. Loctite 5-minute epoxy. I started with a straight connector, and I used a very liberal application of the epoxy. I even poured it a little bit inside the connector to make sure that I had as strong of a bond to that back plate, because I don't want a burning candle falling off onto the floor later on. After that, I added a small piece of pipe followed by a 1/2-inch elbow, another small piece of pipe, and finally a 1/2 to 3/4 adapter as the candle holder. In between each piece, I was sure to apply a good amount of epoxy so that everything would stay put. One thing that I found made it look cleaner was to apply the epoxy to the inside of the fittings instead of to the pipes. I then used painter's tape to hold everything together and in place while the epoxy cured. And that's the finished piece. All in all, I think that this was a pretty good build. Came out better than I thought it would, I can be honest. It's made with interesting materials: sawdust, bark, resin, copper piping, and an aesthetic that I'm pretty happy with. If you got any inspiration from this build, we would love to see your creations on Instagram, so don't forget to tag us. And please click subscribe if you like this video.